Good evening and welcome to tonight's City Council meeting for Monday, October 21st, 2024. Kelly, will you please take the roll?
Yes. Mayor McEachran.
Here.
Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Here.
Councilor Tabor.
Here.
Councilor Cook.
Here.
Councilor Denton.
Here.
Councilor Blaylock.
Present.
Councilor Bagley is not with us this evening. Councilor Moreau.
Here.
Councilor Lombardi.
Here.
Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
She's on her way, I guess.
Tonight we have a. Now I'm going to take these out of order if it's okay, Kelly. I'm going to switch over to Move It or Lose It Day.
Okay.
Do we have that proclamation? We don't.
Yes, we do.
We do. So just wanted to call attention to the proclamation that we had. Mayor for a day, Maxwell Sear. His father was once Councilor Sear, and through New Franklin was able to join as mayor for a day. And I'll read it. It's briefer than most, but nonetheless effective. Whereas the City of Portsmouth has a rich history in promoting and celebrating youth sports and activities, and whereas the City of Portsmouth has demonstrated the power of youth sports activities with the completion of the skate park and fields at community campus, and whereas the people of Portsmouth, through parent-teacher organizations, come together to build and maintain facilities such as elementary school playgrounds, and whereas there remains a lack of physical activities such as trampoline parks, rock climbing, ice skating rinks, swimming holes, and safe bike routes to school, and whereas the physical and mental health of me and my friends is often overlooked during budget process, it remains critical to the future of Portsmouth. Now, therefore, I, Maxwell Sear, Mayor of the City of Portsmouth, on behalf of the members of the City Councils and citizens of Portsmouth, do hereby proclaim Move It or Lose It Day in Portsmouth and urge all members of the community to use and value the outdoor activities we have and work to bring more opportunities forward together, given with his hand in the seal of the city on the 25th day of September 2024. I will note that Maxwell nearly solved the police station for us, took a tour, and he had some ideas on that, but sadly he was only mayor for one day. We're going to have to figure it out. So thank you, Maxwell, and for your father for accompanying you on that. Hopefully it was a interesting look into civic life. Do we have Lori here? No. So I'm going to. So this is a.
She's on the way.
She's on.
She's
right here.
here.
Hey, look at perfect timing. All right. So if you notice. Any of the scarecrows of the port, or pumpkin men, as they are affectionately called, and I also, just as an aside, told my daughter that the pumpkin men that she sees were a result of turning into pumpkin men and women during a harvest moon. I would not recommend anybody saying that if they don't want their kids, to ever fall asleep again. But that was she's loved them. But Lori, you've done such an amazing job bringing spirit of Halloween, but it's just a spirit of community into Portsmouth. I don't think that we don't notice enough all the work that goes into Portsmouth that certainly doesn't happen in here. It happens from all the people in our great city, and you are a shining example of that work, ingenuity, and dedication. So I am pleased to present you with this Mayor's Award, and if I could read it, for her attention, Lori Montagare, for her attention to everyday details that make Portsmouth a better place to live. Lori's tireless, behind-the-scenes efforts to make so many community events so much fun and so memorable year after year, from helping orchestrate Portsmouth, New Hampshire 400th events like the community picnic to the scarecrows of the port that she and her team bring forth every October. Lori is one of the unsung heroes who keep Portsmouth vibrant season after season. As the name she has chosen for her company says so well, these are the everyday details that make a difference, are so important in what makes us a community, and make me proud to be mayor. Lori, you are an inspiration, and I'm really excited to present you with this Mayor's Award. Thanks, Lori. Would you like to say anything? You don't have to, because I didn't ask you to.
I just want to thank you for this incredible honor and the City of Portsmouth for all that you do for our community that goes beyond Portsmouth. And also Portsmouth Chamber, they're so helpful with this, and Dan Whittam and the Kiwanis, and there's a lot of volunteers out there. So I appreciate everybody that helps out with this, and we couldn't do it. It definitely takes a village, as they say. So there's a lot of people behind the scenes too, so I'm really grateful. So thank you for this. It means a lot. It means a lot to me, so thank you.
Thank you, Lori. We have another proclamation. I learned that tonight is Massimo's 30th anniversary, and it's to the day. So really excited to have a proclamation in your honor, Massimo. And there's certainly all the work that you've done on the 400th, but when I was speaking to a number of folks that recommended this, they said that, and I don't want to give away the secret, but whenever somebody asks for help, whether it's fundraising, you always answer the call. This isn't just a ploy to get the masquerade ball back as an annual event, but that was a fantastic night too. I think that you're so full of life that it rubs off on other people, and so we appreciate all that you've done, and I'm proud to be able to read this tonight. Whereas the City of Portsmouth would not be able to call ourselves the City of the Open Door if we could not show examples of extraordinary people who stepped through that door and held it open for the next with all the skill true hospitality affords. And whereas Massimo Morgia is one of those arriving in Portsmouth and starting his business, Restaurant Massimo, 30 years ago today, who has touched generations and continues to help families make memories from the special moments of their lives. Born in Portocorvo, Italy, Massimo brings his mastery of the art of authentic Italian cuisine and the genius of outstanding hospitality for us to enjoy together. And whereas being part of this community is always the treasure people like Massimo say they value most, the friendships and the generosity of the people of Portsmouth who support a variety of charity and causes that are important to Massimo, and so many more, all living testaments to this community spirit. And whereas Massimo has completed another Little Italy committee component of a Portsmouth, New Hampshire 400 legacy project, like the Masquerade, the Carnival, and the Pocket Garden to Come, the documentary The Lost North End, recognized as one of the top 10 at this year's New Hampshire Film Festival, captures the stories of the families displaced from the Vaughan Street neighborhood by urban renewal and ensures that they're remembered and honored. And whereas the city's new friendship city's relationship with Sant'Angelo de Romagna preserves those connections as well and was celebrated on the occasion of the delegation's first visit last year with a reception Massimo organized and catered. And whereas Massimo has observed that over the years he has had the privilege of hosting dignitaries, athletes, authors, and many others from around the world, yet what brings him the most joy is witnessing the generations of families who dine with him, the regulars who bring children and grandchildren. Thanks to Massimo, the resiliency of Portsmouth Italian community endures. Now, therefore, I, Dago McCachran, Mayor of the City of Portsmouth, on behalf of the members of the City Council and citizens of Portsmouth, do hereby proclaim October 21st, 2024 as Massimo Morgia Day in Portsmouth, and a call upon the entire Portsmouth community to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Ristorante Massimo with appropriate festivities and congratulations given with my hand and the seal of the City of Portsmouth on this 21st day of October 2024. I'd like to say a few words. Please do so.
Walter, thank you very much. Appreciate this. I will say just a few words. I'm humbled, and I don't even want to think about what you just said because I won't be able to do what I want to try and do tonight is say a few words. When you reached out, was really, again, I'm going to use the word humbled many times tonight, but I've been so blessed to be in this community. I love Portsmouth. I love being here, and I love the people of Portsmouth. When I got the email from your office, I wasn't quite sure what the expectations of me tonight were, so I responded back. I would be honored to do it. I will be here, and thank you. What are my expectations? Is there anything you need from me? Hoping that I would get a response back that, yeah, you can say a few words, or this are the expectations. I had no idea what to expect. And then I ran into Councilor Bagley, and I said, he congratulated me and said, it's easy, Massimo. The mayor is going to say a few words. They're going to present you with a certificate. You can take a photo. And then if you wish, you can say a few words. He said, but you won't be timed. You won't have that red thing going off 3 minutes. So you'll have all the time in the world. So you can kick back, make yourselves comfortable. I'm going to be here for a little while.
Councilor Bagley's not here tonight.
No, Randy. He said, I got all the time in the world. So I got so much to say. I won't take up too much of your time. I know you're all busy. But I just want to say that I was 24 years old when I bought the restaurant here in town. I was just a kid. I'm an immigrant. My family moved, my mom and my 2 older sisters, one of them, Roberta's here in the audience, moved me and my 2 older sisters here to make a better life. She was a very proud woman and would be really proud to see me up here today, so thank you again for that. We worked hard. She worked 3 jobs to raise us, but I never felt that we were poor. I didn't realize it until I was a little bit older in life that I realized, oh, wait, some kids have things that I don't have. But we always had, plenty of food and love and happiness and joy in the home. If World War III was coming, she would have preserved everything you ever need. We had jars of everything. The food was a big part of our lives. And she was a gracious host herself. She would, when anybody was coming over the house, she would always make sure that she prepared whatever special item that she knew that so-and-so liked. And she went out of her way to prepare things for days for Sunday dinner. And then she would stand outside in the rain and wave a fond farewell to the guests until she couldn't even see the car lights anymore. And you knew that they couldn't see her, but she just graciously was out there happy to entertain them for the day. So I got a lot of that from her. I love doing it. This town has been unbelievable to be able to do it in. As you mentioned, the generations of families who have dined with me over the years. I see kids who have come in and dating and now have grandchildren, and I see that over and over again, and it's such an honor for me to be able to do that and host these people night after night. The community has been so supportive of me. As you mentioned, with any event that I've done, charity event or something that means a lot to me, the outpour is incredible. There's someone in the audience here, I won't say the name because I know that they'd probably rather I didn't, but without question, I had to talk them down to give me less money for an event than they actually did. They wanted to give me $25,000 and I insisted that they only give me 10. That's the kind of generosity and support that I have received from this community. Another gentleman, I hadn't even prepared the sponsorship packet for last year's events, and I was literally sitting down in the restaurant with my marketing guy, because Portsmouth 400, I was all excited. You guys had 400 years to save money for me for these events, and you had nothing in the budget for me. I'm like, whoa, wait, what is going on? So, yeah, Massimo, you need $500,000 to do the events you want, and oh, by the way, go out and get it. I'm like, wait, what just happened? But the outpour of people who contributed was just unbelievable. I was sitting down with my marketing person trying to come up with a sponsorship packet for the Portsmouth 400. And in comes one of my customers. Massimo, I heard you're doing something with the city, with the 400, the Italian thing. I'm going to Florida tomorrow. I need to write you a check. I'm like, I don't even know who to make out the check to. He's, I'll just make it out to you. I'm like, no, don't make it out to me. Hold on. I'm frantically texting Val that I need to know who the check is. And she's like, I'm not sure yet. I'm like, well, no, I need to know right now. This guy's got 10 grand in his hand he wants to give me. One last one was a customer contributed $10,000 to the Portsmouth 400. A week later, he was sitting at the bar, and he and his wife, and they flagged me over, and he said, "Hey, Massimo, I have a check for you." I said, you already gave me a check. He said, "My wife said I'm too cheap," and handed me another $15,000. And there was that, like over and over and over again. It was me mentioning it. Sometimes I would ask, never in the restaurant, because I didn't want that to be a thing, and nobody ever denied me. They all wrote a check for me, whether it was small or large. Everybody was so supportive. There was an incredible event that we did, all from the documentary this weekend. The outpour was amazing. So 24, I started when I was 24, 30 years later. I feel like I'm still at the top of my game. We're still getting accolades, top 100 most romantic restaurant in the country this past year. And I'm getting national accolades. I pinch myself that I'm still able to do that. And it's because of all of you, the people of Portsmouth. And this council, this city management here has been just incredible. I don't know if you guys know this, but I know how much money you make because it's public record. You don't have to get that free. Like, I don't know if you do it for the free parking, but there's a lot right there that charges $175 a month. You don't have to be a city council. You can just pay for a monthly. I don't know if that's why you do it, but it's what you guys do and the amount of work that you do, and you basically do it as, volunteers, as far as I'm concerned, is unbelievable. You guys are always there. I feel like I always have an ear in this town. We may agree to disagree, but I know that I can come and there's an ear, and I think that goes for everybody in this town. We have such an amazing city council and management right now that 30 years, I got to say, we've had some extraordinary people who volunteer. I call you all volunteers because really that's what you are. Again, I'll tell you about that free parking, the parking thing if you need that. But it's been an honor to be around all of you, and I appreciate everything everybody does around here. And I'm humbled to be a part of this community. It's been an extraordinary ride for me. Look, I did it without going into the red.
Thank you very much, Massimo. Gracious words. We're going to go into public comment. I know you got a restaurant to get to, so don't feel anybody has to stick around here. We're going to start with Kevin Schultz from Port City on the roadway hazards.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Manager Kennard and members of the council. My name is Kevin Schultz, and I operate Port City Realty here in town. I'm also a property owner in the city of Portsmouth. The reason for me being here tonight is to bring your attention to the large construction projects on Deer Street and the Foundry Garage area that continue to pose a hazard for pedestrians and automobiles. As you know, there are 4 very active large construction sites, all located down in that area. I am the property manager for 50 Maplewood Drive. That sits at the corner of Maplewood and Deer Street. Our residents exit the parking garage onto Deer Street right into the middle of the construction area. Our issue has been that there's no line of sight when the residents pull out to the left, coming around Bridge Street onto Deer Street. There's literally zero line of sight some days. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. Just reading my notes so I can stay on track and under time. I know Councilor Bagley, who's not here tonight, has been in communication with one of our owners over the course of several months discussing the hazardous environment that's down there. I don't know if that's made its way up to the full council or not. There is no proper or clear line of sight to the left. They can't see automobiles coming around the corner from Bridge Street onto Deer. Sometimes there's a dumpster parked right there. Sometimes, this morning, there was a large JCB construction vehicle taking up the whole lane with a dumpster up top. People coming out of the garage can't even see to the left. That was this morning. Big red pickup truck this afternoon parked in front of a fire hydrant. So we're imploring you to act and make this section of Deer Street a one-way road or something a little bit less hazardous. There's just too much activity going down in that area. Some say there'll be an accident someday. Last Thursday there was. There was an accident with an 18-wheeler truck exiting the construction area. My wife was parked in her car in a City of Portsmouth parking space, and then the 18-wheeler scraped upside her driver's side door and quarter panel. Luckily, there is a police report on file for that at this point. Sometime there's going to be, a more serious accident. It's just, I can keep going on and on, but I implore you to come down, have a cup of coffee, just hang out, look at all the hazards, and, I implore you guys to try to make the area a little bit less hazardous while all this construction is going on. There's going to be a more extensive accident at some point. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right, thank you.
Next up, Mary Lou McElwain on the November 7th presentation.
Thank you. Mary Lou McElwain, 259 South Street in Portsmouth. City councilors, mayor, city manager, and city attorney. I saw in last week's city newsletter that November 7th is planned for a public information meeting on the police station. And at a September city council meeting, Deputy City Manager Woodland said that the needs assessment wouldn't be done for 4 months. So I'm wondering why this public meeting is going to happen with an incomplete presentation. Certainly the several city councilors and many in the community have been asking for a needs assessment for many, many months, and this hasn't happened. So I'm wondering, frankly, why you would put the energy and the time into a presentation and expect the community to attend something that doesn't have the information they're looking for. I would hope that this actually making a request that you reschedule this meeting after the information is complete. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Next up, Dick Bagley on Massimo Morzia North. Can't read the last word.
Lost North End. Dick Bagley, 213 Pleasant Street. Thank you. I wanted to add to what Massimo was saying earlier and read to you a few kind words, not only about Massimo and the whole committee effort, but the importance, I think, to the historical significance of that community to Portsmouth. So to read, through his leadership, Massimo and the Little Italy Committee, Portsmouth 400 was blessed with a masquerade ball and a carnival in recognition of the lost Italian North End from urban renewal. Coming yet is a pocket park with a monument far more prominent and adding to the bench at the front stairs of the Sheraton Hotel, which is dedicated to the families who settled in the North End, and with its message on the bench, rest and reflect a while. Urban renewal was a federal program, but it actually was the City Council that led the effort that resulted in the raising of 30 acres and 400 buildings in the North End for a parking garage, sound familiar, and an urban setting. And that's the references in the proclamation to the Vaughan Mall. But if you watch the movie, you can see 30 acres is a whole lot more than the Vaughan Mall. This past week, a film produced by Massimo, Laura Pope, and Robin Aldo premiered at the New Hampshire Film Festival. It was called The North End, but I thought it was interesting. The title said, A Tale of Wreckage and Resilience. It is our hope that this film will be shown in further settings as an important contribution to this prominent chapter in Portsmouth 400 years. And I know I talked to Nancy, it would be great if we could get this into our school system, let alone into a public library or other settings. I know there are plans to use it with some of the committees in the town. It's a real tribute to Massimo. I want to thank you, Massimo, for your resilience. And I want you to rest and reflect a while. Go sit on the bench. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dick. Next up, Esther Kennedy on the topic of sewage.
Good evening. Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. And I come before you, like I came before you in July, and question the sewage treatment plant. And one of the reasons I'm before you again is I was told that some of the people on the council don't feel that the sewage treatment plant is broken. And I find that amazing. I shared with you that there are 2 sludge processors that are broken. I shared with you that the smell was out of control and that I had heard that whole system was broken. And someone from the city came that evening and backed up all the statements I made as truth. And now we have a pump station that has got pumps down. So I ask you, as we move forward, let's be reality. If we're having a problem, folks, let's get it fixed or share that we're having a problem. Maybe people will be more understanding. After that night, we were told that the reason it still smells is because the system is down and there isn't even a lawsuit about the system. And they were trying to figure it out, but people had defunct on and gone out of business. We have a problem. Tonight, you are going to do a second reading on increasing our numbers of living spaces in our city. And yet, we have a problem. Can that sewage treatment plant, with 2 presses down and the sludge being moved to Pease, and I also heard that we were looking for other places to put the sludge, can we handle, because the plant is broken, can we handle new development at this point in time? Will our infrastructure take that on? Because right now, the way I see it, it will not. The way I see it is we have really strong odor, which means things aren't processing well. We watch trucks go back and forth, and we know there are bags, huge bags, by the pump station. And we've been told in the letters that the pumps are broken. So folks, please don't tell the community there's not a problem. There is a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. No more signed up here. Anybody on Zoom? Seeing none, we will now have the public hearing and vote on ordinance and resolutions. This is the first reading of ordinance amendment to Chapter 1, Article 5, Purchasing Procedures, Sections 1.500 through 1.504 to be deleted in its entirety and replaced with a new Article 5 retitled Procurement Procedures, inclusive of new Sections 1.500 through 1.504.
Your Honor, I move to pass first reading and schedule a public hearing and second reading for November 18th, 2024 City Council meeting.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. These changes to the purchasing procedures and
procurement procedures are coming forward after several meetings in the governance committee for review, and additional review that was done by our auditor to make sure that this was in compliance with our policies around finances. So I just wanted to share with you that it has been through fairly extensive review, and anyone is welcome to go back and review those governance committee meetings.
Councilor Lombardi.
Thank you, Mayor. I would also add that this software that is going to be implemented is being implemented. Will take some time to understand, and it is possible that when we're in full gear with that software, this might need further review.
Thank you. Councilor Lombardi. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next up, public hearing, second reading of ordinance amendment to Chapter 7, Vehicles, Traffic, and Parking, Article 10, Towing, Section 7.1004, Towing or Immobilization of Motor Vehicles for Non-Payment of Parking Fines by amending the ordinance to reflect current procedures, delete and revise outdated language, change notice provisions, and increase fine for violation for removing immobilization device.
Your Honor, Parking Division Director Ben Fletcher has a brief verbal presentation, which he plans to give now. Thanks, Ben.
Good evening, everybody. Appreciate City Manager Conard, Honor Mayor McEachern, members of the council. Appreciate the opportunity to come before you tonight to chat about recommendations to City Ordinance Chapter 7 as it pertains to vehicle immobilization. A little bit of background. The division uses an enforcement tool called Cardinal. Accounts in the Cardinal system are tied to vehicle owners through vehicle registration information. If an account accrues a number of unpaid citations, the balance will increase until it reaches $250, at which time the vehicle is subject to immobilization and placed on what's called a boot and tow list. This is when you see us plant that sticker on the driver's side window. When we write a citation, if we know who the owner is, we'll write them a letter at 30 days, another at 60 days, trying to engage them to alleviate the problem before the balances rise up beyond something they can handle. If we don't know who the owner is, i.e. a first-time offender, then the vendor, Cardinal, will reach out to whichever state issued the license plate and request that information. And usually this works great, but for a number of reasons, sometimes we can't get that information. About 100 times a month, 1,200 times a year, we can't get owner information. So that brings us to the current ordinance. The language there states that the only actionable form of communication is actionable, meaning I can place a boot on the vehicle and encourage engagement in that way, is a certified letter. And that creates a couple of problems for us. First, you can imagine if somebody has 7 or 8 parking citations and they get a slip in the mail that says you've got certified mail down at the post office from the City of Portsmouth Parking Division, they're not going to be racing down to the post office to put their hands on that mail. And so that methodology fails about 80% of the time. Secondly, if I don't have the information at all, I can't write a letter. And in both of these cases, I can't address the vehicle physically, and these balances continue to rise. So the primary change tonight that you'll see in your packet is to allow the red tag sticker, the one on the side of the window, to become an actionable form of communication. So meaning we could address the vehicle at that time. Generally it takes 5 citations to get you to the $250 level, and so that to put the sticker on the car. Even so, we don't recommend that the first application of the sticker would be subject to immediate immobilization. What we recommend is that would trigger a 7-day window, so that the owner would have a week to come down or to address the situation through the normal channels and get it rectified before the balance is out of their control. The remainder of the language changes are basically definitional, cleanup, stuff like that. The internet didn't exist when this was written, so there's a couple of allusions to different ways to get a hold of us now that are modern, and that's pretty much it. Questions?
Any questions? Councilor Lombardi.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wonder, is there a process within this that someone who really doesn't have the money can pay this off over time?
If they engage us, yes.
Yeah.
If they get all the way to red tag, that becomes a more difficult discussion.
Thank you.
Councilor Denton?
Thank you, Your Honor. Not specifically related to this ordinance, but since you're standing there, Ben, I just want to thank you and thank Peter Rice for installing the 2 new electric vehicle charging stations at the base of Bridge Street that are now up and running.
Quick note, through October 15th, 21 sessions on one and 22 on the other, so they're being used.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, thank you, Ben. We'll open up for public hearing speakers. Please rise to for or against proposed ordinance change. Seeing no one rise, no one on Zoom. Closing the public hearing. Any further questions or deliberations?
Your Honor, I would move to pass second reading and schedule third and final reading for the November 18th, 2024 City Council meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Councilor Cook?
Your Honor, I move to suspend the rules and pass third and final reading.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Your Honor, I move to pass third and final reading of the ordinance.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. You know, I always wonder if the move to suspend the rules to pass, if that's considered one, but, you know, we'll figure that out eventually here. All right, next up, public hearing and second reading of ordinance amendment to Chapter 10, Article 6, Overlay District, Section 10.680, Gateway Neighborhood Overlay District by establishing a new incentive overlay district allowing for higher density housing.
Your Honor, we have my colleague, Planning Manager Peter Stith, who'd like to present, and I'm trying to remember how to put share on here, and I don't see share. So give me just a second, Peter. Here we go. Here we go. Thanks for bearing with me.
No problem. Good evening, Mayor and City Councilors. This is the second reading and public hearing for the proposed Gateway Neighborhood Overlay District. And this district is an innovative overlay that will allow for higher density housing and additional workforce housing options in targeted areas. This initial area is on the Commerce Way and Portsmouth Boulevard area of the city, which is currently zoned office research. This area was previously looked at to be rezoned to Gateway by the former Land Use Committee a couple years ago and recently the Housing Committee. And I want to point out, I mentioned the Places to Live dialogue that took place in January, and that effort was a dialogue with over 100 people that some of the consistent goals that came out were to reduce barriers to development and zoning requirements, to look at other areas in the city to possibly allow housing, and also to increase the opportunity for development, height, and density. You can go to the next slide. This table compares the current gateway zone, which the Gateway Neighborhood Overlay will refer to. So the current gateway zoning is in the center, and then the GNOD requirements are on the right. Some changes include building length. Currently, there's a 200-foot minimum, or maximum, rather. And in the proposed overlay, it's increased to 400 feet. As far as setbacks go, for an apartment building, the existing setback is a maximum of 30 feet, so between 10 and 30 feet. And side and rear yard is 15 feet and 20 feet minimums. For a mixed-use building, that requirement for front yard is 0 to 50 feet max, and then the side is 15 and rear is 10. And the proposed setbacks in the overlay are 10 feet for all setbacks. For building coverage, currently for a residential development site, it's 50%, and a mixed-use development is 70%, and the proposed maximum is 75% in the overlay. For open space, for residential and mixed-use developments, the requirement is 20% minimum, and the proposed overlay will require a 10% minimum. Existing Gateway 1 and 2, we have 2 districts. For community space, the requirement is 10% in the G1 and 20% in the G2. The proposed Gateway overlay will have a 10% minimum community space requirement. Dwelling units per acre, currently you can have 16 units by right or 24 units through a conditional use permit. In the proposed overlay, there is no requirement for dwelling units per acre. And our existing workforce housing requirements, if you get, there are 3 incentives you can get in the existing Gateway zoning. And if you choose at least one of the incentives, you have to provide 20% workforce housing. The Gateway Neighborhood Overlay introduces 2 other requirements or options for providing workforce housing in addition to the 20%. So you could construct the units. There's a payment in lieu of construction, and then there's a land transfer option. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the overlay has Article 5B, which is the Gateway zoning. There are several sections in these next 2 slides that are not part of the Gateway overlay. I'm not going to read through all of them, but they refer to building setbacks and separations. Currently, there's an existing 10-foot setback. That will not apply. However, they will still need to comply with the building code. There's a setback on Lafayette Road and Route 1 bypass that will not apply. Go to the next slide. Building placement and orientation. This relates to the front lot line build out. And then, as I mentioned in the chart, residential density per acre, that will not apply. And then elsewhere in the ordinance, there is a section on location of parking facilities, which will not apply. And then currently we have a shared parking conditional use permit. If you have shared parking on different lots, that requires a conditional use permit. And in the overlay, that is allowed, but will not require a conditional use permit. If you go to the next slide. This table is from the draft ordinance that lays out the types of incentives. So currently, you can have an apartment building with 24 units in 4 stories. That's the same by right in the overlay. If you want to go to 5 stories or 80 units, the requirement, you have to provide public realm improvements, which will be approved through the Director of Planning and Sustainability. If you want to go above that to 6 stories or 120 units, that kicks in the workforce housing requirement, and as I mentioned, the 3 options for either constructing, payment in lieu of, or land transfer. The first 2 options will go through the conditional use permit process. The land transfer option, since that has to be approved by City Council, that will go directly to City Council. And this is all inclusive of regular site plan review through the Planning Board. The Planning Board did have a public hearing on Thursday, and they did vote to recommend the council hold second reading, and they added that the council consider adding daycare as a permitted use, as it is not proposed to be added in the current version or draft. So at this point, we can stop and take any questions.
Thank you, Peter. Councilor Tabor?
Thanks, Mayor. Peter, can you clarify, there's a parcel 2130012 that butts up against the Osprey Landing and I think people,
on the corner?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And people,
go ahead.
People might think that there would be only 10 foot of buffer, but I think you've explained to the planning board would be a larger buffer.
Correct. For a development site, when you have multiple buildings, there is a requirement that you have a 75-foot perimeter buffer if it abuts residential district. So all those properties that butt up against Osprey Landing would have to have a 75-foot perimeter buffer.
Thank you.
Councilor Moreau.
If I could suspend the rules, I'd like to bring forward under my name from 15C, the update from the planning board.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. On last Thursday evening, we did have a great discussion. There were lots of questions asked. We had one public speaker and a few written comments submitted. There were concerns about buffers between the new possible development and adjacent neighborhood of Osprey Landing. And under this GNA development, it would be required to be at least 75 feet back. So when you bring up specifically one Osprey Drive was one of the addresses brought up, and we determined it was about 85 feet wide. Therefore, it would be really hard to develop with a 75-foot required setback. So it's really a lot that's, it's not really buildable under those specific circumstances. We also had concerns that this is still too restrictive and that it would not produce more affordable housing unless we go even bigger. Those are some of the concerns brought up. There was discussion around the order to increase density. Could we develop smaller buildings with that 75-foot setback? So there was a talk. So in that 75 feet, what if we allowed 1-story and 2-story buildings? Would some sort of exception like that be worthwhile to explore? There was also discussion around should we add to the list of allowed uses the childcare, and that was part of the final motion. I personally think childcare is a great idea. I think the idea of maybe shorter, lower buildings within the 75 feet might be a great idea. I'd like to make the suggestion that these are all really great ideas that we could continue to talk about and make changes even if we move this forward. We have a work session this Thursday, and we have a lot of zoning that we're talking about, and there's no reason why we couldn't continue to make changes and get more board input as we go on. But I think moving it forward as it sits now would be appropriate. And when I do make a motion, there are going to be just some typographical errors that were found that we can correct. But beyond that, I think it's good to move forward, would be my recommendation as is, and then we continue to work to try to improve it as time goes on.
Councilor Moreau. Councilor Lombardi.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know whether you got this typographical error. It's in 10.686.30 in paragraph 9. The first sentence of that is confusing. Any land
Yes.
conveyed? Okay, so you corrected that.
Any land conveyed under this section may be conveyed as a condition subsequent. Yes.
Great, thank you.
That is one of them.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I have a question around that 10-foot setback, especially when we're talking about the front of the buildings. Does that allow enough space for sidewalk development by the city?
Technically, yes. I mean, currently, the setbacks are maximum, so you have to be up within that distance. And typically, then there's right-of-way, so that would allow for a sidewalk.
And with this level of density, I guess that we might follow up, do we anticipate that this is still going to, I think the goal is to create a neighborhood feel in this environment with these 10-foot setbacks. Do you think we can still accomplish that goal? Asking you this as the planner.
Yes, I think, yeah. It just allows for more flexibility in development design, so I think it certainly can.
Great. Thank you.
No other questions at this time. We'll open it up to public hearing speakers. Please rise to for against. You just have to state your name and where you're from.
Hello. Hey, City Council. My name is Marcio Von Mulen. I'm a resident down on Thaxter Street. I'm here to support this effort towards adding more housing and, in general, all efforts towards adding more housing in Portsmouth. I think members of my generation just have a tremendous challenge in finding a place to live here and to stay here. I have a personal story that I want to share. I believe you all know the numbers, 0.5 vacancy rate, home prices going up 50% in 5 years. But I think a personal story helps. So I have a close family member who has basically spent their life here. They went to UNH. They have a degree in mechanical engineering. They've been working at the shipyard for 10 years. They have a highly technical, important job. They work really hard. Their partner has had multiple jobs, both in the service industry, working, shifts downtown at bars, having a day job and an office job. And they've been living in a one-bedroom apartment that you can see from here across the pond. And they had a daughter over a year ago. And I was so excited that my family, my youngest son was also born here in Portsmouth, that they were going to get to spend time together. Every time that I walked downtown to go to a restaurant or get a coffee, I could just walk and see them. And it was all going to be great. And they've been looking for housing for well over 2 years because they've had this plan to raise a family here in Portsmouth. And they're making good money. They're making over 6 figures. They ought to be able to find a place to buy a home or some kind of housing that is their own here in this city. And as the market stands, they've looked at, over 100 places. They tell us stories about going to open houses with mobs of people and just being completely, priced out of this market where clearly the demand is far outstripping the supply. And I think this is a story that, a lot of us hear about and know about, but I just wanted to share. This last weekend we were hanging out, and they told me, Marcio, we just gave up on Portsmouth. We're starting to look at like Epping or some other place where it's going to be a 40-minute drive each way to the shipyard, adding more traffic, taking away from the vitality of the downtown that we all love. And I think these are stories that, very rarely, they don't have the time to come here and share this because they have kids at home and, they're just, it's not on their radar and one person is not going to come and make a change for themselves. But these stories are out there, and I think we should keep that in mind. I understand that there's always tensions about new developments. There's always tensions about infrastructure and so on. But, people built this city. We built the infrastructure that we need, that we're all living here. And I think we can build the infrastructure that can support the residents of the next generation to, make Portsmouth an even better place than it already is. So thank you.
Thank you, Marcio. Any other public speakers?
Do I have a 3-minute time limit?
No.
Okay, Elizabeth Bratter.
Brevity is always great, but it's a limited amount of time.
Okay, Elizabeth Bratter, property owner, 159 McDonough Street. I've been looking at this for quite a while now, hours and hours. So what I'm giving you is a little packet, and there are still questions for me that are not clear, and that is, are the uses going to be the G1 and G2 uses, or what are the uses going to be dictated by? So the top page is a comparison of G1 and G2, what's permitted and what's not. And pretty much they're the same except for the restaurant. Restaurant has no occupancy. And the other one that's added is assisted living. That is not allowed in G1 or G2. That requires a special exception. And the restaurant functions in G1 allows 250 participants, and G2 only allows 50. And I think that's an important issue to deal with before you move this forward. I also included each one of the lots and what they are sit next to. I'm not really sure what pup tanks have in them, but they exist. Then I created a chart that shows you next to each other the GNOD, the workforce housing, the realm, and the transfer. And then I listed off the exceptions. So each exception is listed, and then underneath is what Gateway actually allows. And at the bottom, I did the bottom of one of these. Oh, at the bottom of the list of each one of the lots, I looked into one of the things that came up at Planning Board was what's going on with the Schiller property. So I put that at the bottom so you can read about it and make your own decisions. So now I will tell you my letter. Please do not forward the overlay district for third reading. Please send it back to the planning board to address some of the issues brought up at the planning board meeting. And you may have thought about them. Please find okay, you already got that. So the reason why I want you to send it back to planning board is when planning board had the discussion to move this forward for second reading, there were quite a few questions that were left open, and it was decided that they didn't want to go into the nitty-gritty until they heard back from you as to what they should really focus on. So therefore, I think it should go back to the planning board to work out those little nitty-gritty things that they brought up, which I sent you in a city council email. The biggest question is in regards to the 75 perimeter buffer, and that is that the definition of the perimeter buffer is from the lot line, how far the building can be from the lot line, which when you look at it legally or by definition, that means that it's actually a setback. So I'm hoping that the legal department who's sitting here can clarify whether the perimeter buffer is actually a setback by law. To me, it is, because a setback is to the lot line, and by definition, that's what it says. So that's a big question. I want to know if the abutters were notified. This is an overlay district. Do they know what's coming? There don't seem to be any regulations directly regarding abutting residential or industrial, such as graduating styles, but Beth did explain that that's something that they'd like to discuss and maybe add in. And what about the people who live in the Osprey Landing? That perimeter buffer is key, and if it becomes that it's actually a setback, then we really need to look at this differently. The 75% coverage allows for a lot of units, which is the desired result, but the 10% of open space is concerning. Open space often is filled with stones and asphalt walkways and little to no green space, which helps to absorb noise, pollution, and adds to the general well-being of humans and their pets. Even 15 to 20% would still allow for very large buildings with many units, since a lot of these lots, except for one, are 4 to 8 acres. Some of them are close to 9 acres. So these are big lots. You can put a lot of housings on there. I figured over 300 on just one of the 8 acre lots. There seems to be a lack of clarity on which uses are allowed by right. The added uses that are listed on the right side of the chart I gave you are permitted, on the left side are permitted in Gateway, except for the residential facility. And then the other one, again, is about the restaurants. We want to know what that capacity is. That's important for people who live there, and it's very important for people who live next to it. Gateway does allow bars up to 250 people or more, depending on that. So those are things that are concerning. Most of the proposed properties once were wetlands, and fill was added to make them what they are today. One has to wonder about how much height and spacing of buildings can be supported at these locations. The Durgan Park, the Durgan Road, which is the Christmas tree shop, they limited their heights and the amount of buildings they put there because they're on wetlands and they knew it couldn't support as much. I don't know how much of this property is wetlands. There was a large wetland back there before it was built, which I remember quite well. So that's something to consider. There are also some lots that are suggested for the overlay, which is questionable, and Beth Monroe, the Council Monroe, brought that up, and she talked about 021700021819. It's a 0.02 acre lot, and it's in general residence B. It's actually in that residence, and that was brought up by the planning board as well. They were wondering what that had to do, and the only way it would work there would be if it was combined with the hotel, but at this point it is not. So please send the GNOD back to the planning department and have them clarify all the uses, create setbacks to residential industrial abutters, whether these lots can support the suggested building increases to use the incentives, and the exemption should be clarified in regards to that perimeter buffer. And was a developer consulted as to whether these incentives are financially feasible? Why add another store if the expense won't offset the closable housing? And the other thing I thought about in regards to developers is they're going to be able to put a lot on one of these 8 acre lots, a lot of buildings. So will they really have any incentive to go bigger when they can do it already? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Any other speakers?
Good evening, Petra Huda, 280 South Street. My questions and my concerns are coming from what was in the packet and observing the planning board meeting of last Thursday. Right off the top, I kind of want to know, and this has been happening quite often, why some of the meetings have no audio. My intent was to watch that on TV. There was no audio. And when you go to YouTube, there is audio, and this isn't the first time this has happened. Just a note for something you might want to check on. So, in reviewing the planning board discussions on this, I, like Liz, do not think this is ready for third reading. And this was brought up by a member of the planning board in the discussion. So my first question on this, because I learned a lot of stuff that wasn't actually made public when the discussion was held about the relationship to this zoning and the Kane agreement for the McIntyre. So my first question is this really spot zoning to comply with an agreement that is awaiting approval? According to Attorney McCourt, who spoke last week after asked a question, there is already a pre-arranged negotiated agreement, settlement agreement, per Mr. Kane for the second lawsuit against the city, awaiting approval based on these zoning requirements. So I guess my question would be, is that why we're not taking the time to go through this and actually read this and think about the details, and why is it being rushed? The next question I'd like to have answered is, since I did view the planning board meeting and tonight's package, I would thank Mr. Stith for his presentation, but I would like to know why his presentation was not in the planning board package and it was not in the package for the public to view tonight, as it was for everybody else. That's one thing. The other thing that is really interesting that I find kind of that needs to be discussed here is, for me, why Councilor Moreau, after your discussion about being on the planning board for eight years, how did the GNOD zoning come forward to first reading without being signed off on the planning board? The first RSA in land use and zoning says this should be in the master plan, which I couldn't find it. I don't know where it is. And then it needs to move forward through the planning board before first reading for recommendations. That, as far as I know, didn't happen. That's happening tonight. So I find that as a problem. A great concern from the planning board meeting, and another planning board member picked up on this, Mr. Simonis, was a statement made by the councilor that the planning board needs to move this forward. Move this forward and see what happens. And when Mr. Simonis asked, why can't we get it right the first time and hold it back, it said this was discussed previously and we need to see what happens. Now, I don't know if you meant by let's see what happens and see if anybody shows up to say anything, like they did not at the meeting. And tonight, it's a little sparse, so you could just move forward. But I'm here to ask questions because it affects all of us. The next question I would have is what consideration with this higher density, if you look at your comparison sheet, the density is very high here, has been the strain on the already stressed, as was discussed previously tonight, infrastructure. Water, sewer, police, fire, this all goes back to the residential taxpayer, with whom you just hit with a giant reassessment, some of them up to 250%. This proposal needs impact fees. Please see RSA 674-21, which gives you an idea of the innovative land uses and how impact fees could be assessed here. That's another reason it needs to go back to planning and not to third reading. The last question, and I think this is the biggest one, what is the value or the cost to the taxpayer on this, of this agreement with the new zoning? It's been put forward that this is great, it's not going to cost the taxpayer anything. Is it not going to cost the taxpayer for additional fire, water, budget? Can our infrastructure hold this density, this amount? If you look at your comparisons, I didn't do the calculations because, of course, I didn't have the comparisons that you have. Look at how much you can increase the stress on our current infrastructure. The last question I would have is this defined as commercial property? Is this going to be defined and taxed as such? As we just saw, the residential is going through the roof and the commercial is going down. And please don't tell us that more commercial development is going to help our tax base, because it doesn't, and it's been proven. I think that's it, and I think taxpayers have a right to know the value of this pre-arranged agreement that you're shooting for to actually settle this, because I think that's a big mystery to the rest of us. For all the residents who have no idea what's going on because they have not watched all the planning board meetings and any of this, and it's being rammed through again, all of this information needs to be put out there before you have third reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. Any other speakers?
Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. As the first speaker spoke, I can relate. I have a niece who's trying to find a spot also, so I understand your concern. However, I am not guaranteed with this new zoning that will happen. Look at all the things that we put in that are now way overpriced, that the people that we're talking about still cannot afford. I also worry, like I said in the very beginning during public comment, about our infrastructure. Now, if we are planning to run this sewage to Pease, have you talked to Pease yet? With the migration of some of the items from the Toland site towards our water, do we have enough water for our future developments? As Ms. Huda said, what does this look like? There's been no discussion, to my knowledge, with our fire, police, our ambulance, and even our hospital. This is a lot of development, and could potentially be a lot of development. I also am pretty sad to see that we are not asking more of the developers. So there is housing, that it's not all based on a huge height. What other things? Let's get creative, folks. You are known as a council of development. We know that. So why don't we get creative and come up with new things that we put in place? Look around at some of the other communities. Some of you went up to look at the police station in Dover. Look at what they're doing. You know, one of the planning board members stood up and said, this isn't ready for prime time. So our community has to ask, why is it not part of the master plan? I haven't even heard about the master plan, it's due. Why are you folks in the master plan? Why isn't zoning this big that is going to affect our wetlands? It's going to affect our infrastructure. not being discussed and waited for the master plan? Why is it being rushed through? Is it because of a lawsuit? Can you really look and say that's not spot zoning? Or is there something else going on here that we don't know about? Now, some of you have been on boards for numerous years. ACC, planning. Before you even were counselors. How come we're hearing about this now? And we're not taking the time to do it right? Where are the parks? On Facebook tonight, a lot of people were talking about playground equipment at schools. Where is that inclusive of this? If it truly is for families. What is the amenities you're going to bring into this development to support those families? Now, we heard from Ms. Broder that we're bringing in potentially a lot of bars. Is that what we want? I don't know. But you're not asking the community either. You're bypassing a master plan. And the rest of the community has to ask for what for? Why are we bypassing it? Why aren't you giving people a point of discussion? If we're truly making a neighborhood, it's kind of ironic that we're sat here and we heard, and for those of you who went to the movie, we heard the horrors of what happened to one of our neighborhoods during urban renewal. But if we're truly going to create a neighborhood, which I'm totally in favor of, then how do we do it right? How do we make it so it's accessible, it's good for families, it's affordable, our infrastructure can be taken care of? I mean, ideally, up there, you'd want to run it the sewage line to Pease. But have we made a deal with Pease? Do we know how much sewage is being pumped through our little pipe out to Great Bay from Lonza? What do we know? We haven't asked those questions. So I go back to what the planning board member who said, is this ready for prime time? And I'm here to tell you, I do not believe it's ready for prime time. And if you are truly a council that wanted public input and wanted people involved, you would make it part of a master plan and you would send it back to the planning department to fix what needs to be fixed. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Any other public speakers in the council chambers? Looking on Zoom, I see Tom Neese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Tom Neese. I reside at 419 Richards Avenue in Portsmouth. I submitted a letter which hopefully is in the council packet, and so I'll go through it rather quickly just to make sure it's other people who may not have seen it are aware of it. Many, but not all of these comments were presented to the planning board. I listened to the planning board meeting, and I don't really think that any of them were specifically discussed during the planning board meeting. So I still have questions on what the answers to them are. Most of my comments are really going to be technical in nature and not really address whether this is a good idea, whether we have the infrastructure or any of that, but just to try and make sure that the draft ordinance is clear enough so that it's understandable what we're trying to do. The first point I'd like to make is that there seems to be an underlying assumption in the ordinance that the only reason a developer will try and get one of the incentives, like the density bonus or the bonus on height, is in order to have increased housing. And so the ordinance doesn't have any specific requirements on what the minimum number of housing units it is going to have to be provided by a developer in order to get these incentives. The only place there seems to be any mention of a minimum is in one of the tables where it talks about buildings of more than 24 units. Well, I readily admit that right now it may not be financially worthwhile to go up a higher story for office or some other sort of building. We don't know that that's the case for sure. And I think if you really want this to be sure that it's going to increase housing, there should be something in here that says there's a minimum number that the developer has to provide in order to take advantage of these bonuses that they get with the incentives. the section that exempts many of the properties in the GNOD from several of the Gateway Neighborhood Multi-Use District provisions, which were mentioned and pointed out in the discussion. I really question whether those are a good idea or not in an area where you're hoping to have a neighborhood. They're specifically included in the Gateway Neighborhood mixed-use developments in order to encourage a walkable neighborhood. And here we're saying at least several of those, which involve stepping back heights of buildings, et cetera, aren't needed here. And I don't see a real clear reason why that should be the case if what we're really trying to do is create a neighborhood. There's nothing that I can find in the draft ordinance that says that the land transfer option has to be a gift, if you will, or a transfer of land in the same area that the development's going on, in the same neighborhood. Now, from conversation at the planning board, that appears to be the planning board's interpretation of the ordinance, and I think that's the deputy city attorney's interpretation too. I'm not quite sure what it's based on. I think a very simple change to the ordinance just to make it clear that that's what is going on could be useful. The proposed land transfer and payment in lieu of workforce housing options do not seem to make an explicit link to what the transfer entitles the developer to. As an example, there's talk that a developer with a development of 20 acres has to donate 1 acre of land to the city that the city can use, presumably for housing project that it's going to do. What does the developer get out of that? Can they do multiple buildings with that transfer that get the bonuses, the incentives? Is it just one building? It's not clear what that is. It's the same problem with the payment in lieu of, presumably that might be defined later by the fee committee, but I think it should be appropriate if there's something that the city council has in mind. How much of a bonus do you get for 1 acre or whatever is transmitted? There's already been talk tonight about the idea of setbacks next to residential districts. I want to point out that there's not just one lot in this area that is affected by this. This abuts several other lots. The proposed area abuts several other lots that are in a residential district. And while there's been a lot of talk about the 75-foot buffer, I'm a little confused because section 10.590 of the zoning ordinance refers to the minimum distance between non-residential uses and residential and mixed residential districts. Section 10.591 says that in general, business district, office research, there's other districts, but office research is the one that's appropriate here. No structure or additions to a structure shall be located within 100 feet of a parcel in a residential or mixed residential district. There's two questions here. The main one is this going to apply to the Gateway Neighborhood Overlay District? This particular section of the ordinance was obviously written when residential uses were not allowed in the office research, but they are now. And so if someone exercises the GNOD option, does that mean that particular parcel is no longer considered office research and they can put a building closer than 100 feet to one of the general residence areas which it abuts? I don't know what the answer is to those questions, but I think that needs to be cleared up. I think that's all of my comments. I think many of these, it would be helpful to be cleared up before this goes to third reading. I was a little concerned by listening to some of the discussion at the planning board, which was along the lines of, let's move this forward. We can always fix it later if it doesn't work. I don't know, again, what that timeline means, but it's clear that if it doesn't work in this area, we're going to be stuck with the result, at least in this particular area. You may be able to fix it for other areas, but not for this one. So I think spending a little time and a little thought on some of these issues would be advantageous in the long run. I would also point out that it was made clear at the planning board meeting that this particular zoning effort is not a part of the settlement agreement with Redgate Kane, as expressed by the, I believe, deputy city attorney who was at the meeting. And so for that reason, I don't see why there's any need to move this forward until at least some of these specific questions are cleared up. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Any other speakers? Closing the public hearing. Any other questions from the council? Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I would love to ask a few questions of the planning department, if I can, just a few of these questions that we can see if we can get them cleared up. One of the questions that was asked specifically was about the assumption that we're going to get housing and we're not going to get mixed use, essentially, development, and that in order to get the bonuses do they have to build housing? Do they not have to build housing? How does this change impact that? To get the bonus, do they have to build additional housing?
Right.
Okay.
Yep. It's related to number of units, dwelling units. It doesn't have to have a mixed-use component. It can be all housing,
Okay.
but it couldn't be all commercial. And you can't get the incentives for commercial.
And I guess my other question is, there was a question about that 100-foot setback against general residence, but that was in office research. When we're changing a zone to a GNOD district, it essentially becomes gateway. Is that accurate?
It references the gateway section, but you still have the underlying OR. So if you were still just using the property for office research and were building something that was permitted in office research, then that section would apply. But if you want to build residential and use the GNOD zoning, then the GNOD would apply.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So Peter, just to follow up on that, regardless if it's commercial or all residential, or it has to have some residential, commercial component, it would still, for the increase, it would still require the payment in lieu or the transfer to get the increase, or the property transfer to get the increase in that building act, correct?
Correct. And in addition, you have to do public realm for any of the incentives. And then if you go to the 6 stories or 120 units max, that's when the workforce housing options kick in.
Okay. And is let's see, just forgot the question when you said that. Give me a second, I'll come back. Sure. Any other questions? Councilor Morrell?
Could you just explain what kind of notification to the butters or the residents happens when we're doing a zoning change like this?
Because it was less than 100 parcels, we sent notifications to all the property owners.
But do you send notifications to the butters or just the property owners?
Just
of
the property
change?
owners. Yep.
Your Honor.
Assistant Mayor?
Thank you. Just a couple reference points touching on some of the public comment we heard. When doing research with this a few years ago, that this had actually come up when we were just in land use, of looking at where we could increase density, housing densities in areas which would potentially have the lowest impact on some of the residential areas. So looking at kind of the outlays. And this was one that came up very early in conversation a couple years ago. But touching on some of the conversation that was said earlier, when I look at this overlay district, I've compared it personally. I'm just pulling up the list of the places that I've compared it to. The town of Salem, Kensington, Durham, Sanbornton. There's a few more that all have housing and housing overlay districts, whether that would be manufacturer, senior, or general density overlays. And it is my opinion that this overlay fits the standard that we've seen in many New Hampshire communities. And so I will be supporting moving this to third reading. I believe that a lot of our ordinances become work in progress as we shift as a community and as we shift as a state. And I feel that housing and trying to look at where we can increase housing in our community needs to be on the forefront of everything we do. I do believe this goes in line with our master plan. While not identified exclusively because it wasn't thought of the last time that the master plan was being developed. Housing is always number one. Walkability is number one on our master plan and consistent with creating the creation of neighborhoods. So again, it is my opinion, as stated other people's opinions, that this does fall in line with our master plan.
Thank you, Sister Mayor. Peter, one question on the, and I don't know if this is a legal question or a Peter Stith question, Planning Department. When it says that housing or a parcel may be offered in the same GNOD, is that the same area? Is there specifics on where that parcel is going to be received and approved from the city, or is the discretion with the city council?
I think it's on purpose discretion with the city council. I mean, there could be a more valuable property that's outside of the GNOD, but it's going to be up to the council to make that call.
Yeah. Councilor Cook and then Councilor Tabor.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to say that two years ago, when we started to address our serious shortage of housing, we were talking a lot about where do we locate additional housing. I spent some time driving around all the areas in the city that are underdeveloped in some ways, trying to determine, is this a good space for housing? And what's intriguing to me about the space that we're talking about, putting in the GNOD, is that it is underdeveloped. It's an ideal location for additional housing because it's walkable to 2 grocery stores, several restaurants. It's easily accessible, like easy access to bike routes to downtown. It's easy access to transit. So this is a wonderful location to be considering for additional housing, and I had looked at it then and realized that it wasn't zoned appropriately for additional housing. And that's part of, I think, the effort that the council's been working on the whole last year in shifting zoning generally to Gateway District to allow for more housing development. And this is the next opportunity we have to look at even more dense housing development in an area that's adjacent to housing, but also adjacent to a commercial area that offers a lot of opportunity for new residents. So,
Councilor Cook, thank you. Councilor Tabor, and then Councilor Blaylock, and then Councilor.
Yeah, I just have a process question. So if we pass second reading tonight, the planning board takes another crack at this, right, before third reading?
No, they've had their public hearing and made a recommendation. So
okay.
Councilor Denton. Oh, Councilor Blaylock. Oh, you can go. Councilor Denton.
There was talk about infrastructure, and this might just be a lapse on my part, but would the sewage go to the Pease wastewater treatment facility, or would it go through town down to?
I think it goes to Pierce Island.
Pierce Island, that's what I had thought.
And like with any development, there would be site plan review, and if any infrastructure improvements need to be made, that would most likely fall on the developer.
Thank you.
Councilor Blaylock.
Thank you. I just want to thank all the work that's been put into this. I know we've been looking at this area since we were on the housing committee, which is, we don't even have a committee anymore.
We do. We do have a housing
We have a
committee
housing
now.
committee. Sorry, the land use committee. I'm
Which
sorry.
recommended this.
We've been talking about this since the land use committee. We still have a housing committee. We don't have a land use committee anymore. I misspoke. But I think this move, there's a lot of details and there's a lot of stuff that we can nitpick at and hold it back. I think this is pro-housing. And like Marcio said, we got to offer opportunities for people for housing. That's the only way that we're going to allow people to move here. If we limit the housing, then the price just keeps going up and less people are able to live here. So I'm going to be very supportive of this, and I hope we move forward tonight. Thank you.
Councilor Tabor, this question for Peter.
Well, are we moving off of questions into deliberation, or?
Well, if
Well, it's,
there are no
it's
more
kind of
questions,
a nebulous questions and deliberations, but
Okay.
feel
I'd
free
be
to.
happy to make a motion if we're.
Why don't we
ready
make a
with-
motion so that we can.
I'd make a motion that we move to pass second reading and schedule a third and final reading for the November 18th, 2024 City Council meeting as amended with the typographical changes.
Second.
Councilor Tabor.
Yeah, I wanted to speak in favor of this. The germ of this idea originated in the Housing Committee, and there was also interest from property owners in Commerce Way that be rezoned Gateway. And regardless of how it got here, the discussions led to a lot of innovative ideas and innovative zoning that's going to allow us to boost the city housing stock in a location that's not going to have a lot of neighborhood impact. The east side of these 23 acres is close to a neighborhood, but the west side, which is far more likely to be developed, has no abutting neighborhoods. It's walkable to downtown. It's 1.9 miles. It's walkable to a grocery store. There's a chance to have create a neighborhood, which is part of the master plan, as the assistant mayor says. The introduction of a land transfer option could create new places for the housing authority or similar nonprofit developers to give us at least 80 units. And on our housing committee, we have a goal of 500 below market units of housing. We see things through that lens. And if you see things through that lens, you are absolutely in favor of this. We need both below market housing and we need market rate housing. We need 1,500 units in the next 2 years to balance our market. And this could really give us a giant step. We can test a lot of the zoning concepts that haven't been tested. We've had a lot of discussion in the housing committee. When we get into our hundreds of pages of zoning, all the ways that we hobble housing growth, parking, density restrictions. One of the things that's relieved here is a restriction of 24 acres, 24 units per acre. Why do we have that? Why do we have that when we have a housing shortage? We're going to be able to use slack parking space from a declining office market to create parking for housing. Well, we couldn't do that under the current parking restrictions that allocate that you have to have parking for a building in that same parcel. So these are really good creative steps, and in an environment in New Hampshire where you can't force inclusive zoning, I think the land transfer option allows us to leverage as much as possible from the private market for additional below market units. It's something I think we have to try if we're going to get to the goals that we have to create housing. Now, it's true I look at it through that lens as somebody on the housing committee, but what's the most important problem that we have to solve in the city?
Councilor Tabor. Councilor Moreau.
I'd just like to speak a little bit to, there was a lot of pushback that we're trying to rush this. I believe it was about 2 years ago when someone actually spoke at a planning board meeting and actually asked us to allow housing in this zone. And that was back when we were actually changing some of the things to Gateway through the Land Use Committee. So this has been a request that has been on our radar for a long time. Land Use talked about it. Housing committees talked about it. It's been something that I believe was our marching orders out of the Portsmouth Listens that came last February. They told us to go out and create more housing, to stop talking about it and start doing. And that's what I feel like they wanted us to do. And I believe this is a great step forward in that direction of trying to get more housing in a reasonable and in a place that, as everyone else has spoken, and I agree with everything they've said, doesn't really have any residential development, but it's in a great place to have some residential development. So I feel this is good to move forward. I feel if there are issues with this, I think we can keep talking about it. I think we can keep making changes. I think adding childcare is a great thing that I will bring back to planning board and ask them to recommend again, because I think we could add that at a future date. And if there are other changes like that, I say bring them forward and let's talk about it. But I will be voting in favor of this.
Councilor Lombardi.
Thank you, Mayor. As others have said, this has been part of our charge for 3 years now. It's always been on our agenda. And I think I think it was on the agenda before this council as well. So this is a big step. It's a creative solution. It's an ideal property, and I will vote for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lombardi. Any other comments? Let's say a few words in support of this motion. First, thank you to the Planning Board and for the speakers tonight. The emails that we received, they're certainly appreciated. I want to point out the Planning Board, with the recommendation, there was no issues of what was in here. There was focus on what is not in here, childcare. Certainly support that, and many other things that we're going to learn here. One thing that I think was illuminated to me during this last revaluation is what was at the bottom of the list in terms of commercial value and what was at the top. So if we take what's at the bottom, that's office research. It's the reason why commercial didn't keep pace with residential, because more people are wanting to come here to live than wanting to come into an office. So when we have the opportunity to turn that into the most desirable, we do have the opportunity to increase the tax base, which will provide needed relief to those residents that are already here. There was definitely a good point one of the speakers made in terms of, we're not dictating what's in there in terms of a requirement of how many units. We can talk about the sizes, but we are getting the transfer when it reaches a certain point, and that is a positive thing for below market housing, which we desperately need. But it's also, I think it's difficult, and I think this is sort of why we get in the position that we do, where zoning laws seem to lag what the market wants or what we want, is because we work so hard to get it perfect that we never do. And there was speakers here tonight speaking about how this should be a part of the master plan. I fully support it being a part of the master plan. And the best way to make it a part of a master plan is to do the work, see the feedback, incorporate it into the master plan. It's very difficult for us to wave a wand and say, this is exactly what should be here. Because we did that in these parcels. It used to be, Mariners Village. And now it is, now it's a lot of office space. And the market is not necessarily there for that. So I think that I'm excited about this. I'm excited to move it forward. I think it will build more housing. It will get affordable housing, but we'll also get a lot of lessons here that we can apply to all the other OR districts that we have. So for that reason, I support it, and I thank the members of the Land Use Board and the Housing Committee that really kind of, put this out. And I remember, thinking when you guys came back with all those ideas in terms of, what we should be doing in terms of the low-hanging fruit, maybe this could have been on it then, but that we're doing it now, I think is really exciting, because I think we've taken what you've done in that committee and thought of more innovative ways to bring more housing. And I guess that's the last point. We've tried a lot to get housing built by developers. We now have an RFP that has gotten 4 responses. I think that there's a demand for those parcels. This will help us get more of those parcels and get developers out of the business of managing that and into the business of building and giving us parcels to be able to use for other nonprofits that want to be able to build there. So with that, call the question. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Next up, City Manager Conard's items which require action.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have 6 items tonight. The first one is a request to hold a public hearing to repurpose transmission main funds. You all will recall the authorization of funds in fiscal year 2022 to construct a new water main across the Little Bay to supplement the 2 existing mains. We've had really successful work in improving the 2 mains and improving their resiliency. We've had great success with valve replacement. And what we would remind the council this time is that additional funds and time will be needed for the permitting and design of and installation of a new main across Little Bay because of the extremely large price tag to do so. So due to competing needs, staff is looking to request the reallocation of the balance of previously authorized funds for this project to address other more pressing water infrastructure needs at this time. And to do so, we need to request a public hearing with that at the next meeting.
Your Honor, I move to establish a public hearing at the November 18th, 2024 City Council meeting for consideration and vote on a resolution authorizing a bond issue and/or notes of up to $4,300,000 for water system improvements and rescinding a like amount of funds authorized to be borrowed for the replacement of water transmission mains beneath Little Bay, which is not ready to be undertaken at this time.
Second.
Any comments? Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just, when we get to the hearing, can we have action sheets so we know what is being addressed with the 4.3 million exactly?
Happy to do that.
All right, thank you.
Makes sense.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. Next up is a request, at the request of New Hampshire DOT, that they come to present what seems to be about a good 25, 30-minute presentation on the status of their Route 1 corridor improvement project. What they'd like to do is give the community an update and move forward with some preliminary recommendations. So what we thought would be appropriate is to have a work session to do that, to give it ample time. So we're proposing to do that at the beginning and before the next council meeting on November 18th at 6 p.m.
Yes, I move that the city council schedule a new NHDOT US Route 1 corridor improvement project work session on November 18th, 2024 at 6 p.m.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. Item number 3 brings to you a request to approve a memorandum of agreement between the city and AFSCME 1386A, one of our collective bargaining units, regarding the implementation of a stipend for employees holding a Class B commercial driver's license. Approval of this memorandum will enable the city to offer additional compensation to employees who apply for or already possess this license. It really has a lot of value to all the folks in this realm. It allows us to retain those who have obtained it, and it really has value to not only the staff who have it, but the supervisors, and it's a great asset to us. It really is also a way to reflect and compensate for the equivalent educational stipend in this particular line of work as we do for other lines across the city.
Rich?
Sorry. I move to accept that the city council approve the memorandum of agreement between the city and AFSCME 1386A as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Oh, Councilor Barty.
I would just like to add that this is a good opportunity for a lot of the people who are driving the trucks, picking up your garbage, and what it also does is that it comes with a commitment to work for the city for a period of time as well. So.
Thank you, Councilor Barty. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you, and thank you to Human Resources Director Kelly Harper, who's with us on Zoom. Thanks, Kelly. Item number 4 is a request to hold a public hearing at our next scheduled meeting on ARPA funding to essentially do as follows, and it's a little complicated to follow, so bear with me a moment. So, as a reminder, the city was grateful to receive $12.88 million in ARPA funding. We have until December 31st, 2024 to obligate those funds. We have brought to all of the city councils before us and to now the request to authorize all but $110,706. So as we were closing out our ARPA this fall, staff looked at how to do that. So in addition to looking to authorize and obligate that small amount of money that remains, we have come to find out that there are 3 existing ARPA expenditure lines that will have a balance, either due to the fact that the project came in less than estimated, or we would be unable to obligate safely the funds remaining by the obligation deadline. So those projects include, and they're listed in the packet, money for our community public health assessment, money toward the climate action plan completion, and part of the CAD system software for the police department. What we would like to do in turn with all of those funds is as follows. We would like the climate action plan recommendations, which include the establishment of the Bright Action dashboard and the purchase and installation of an electric bike charging station to take place. We use money to approve the climate action plan itself, but we want to be clear that these are, it also could fund recommendations that come from the plan. You'll recall that there was approval for money to support a bookmobile, mobile services for the library. In order to do this in the best way we and the staff feel possible, we look to add additional funds to that project so that we can get an electric vehicle with a proper upfitting to support their needs for the foreseeable future. And we also are looking for to add additional funding to the recommendations that will come from the Community Health Needs Assessment, which is later on in the packet under my information items. So the exciting thing about that request is that we had some money set aside. We have the ability, with your approval at the hearing next meeting, to set aside additional funds to support those recommendations and go from the $250,000 we initially set out to $350,000. And lastly, with the remaining dollars, and I'm going to look to my packet so I have all of this correct, our Public Works Director would like everybody to know that the Maplewood Avenue Bridge, which is in full force, as you all painfully are aware, and hopefully we'll be wrapping up soon, but the bridge we found has a 450-foot section of water main that was identified as in need of replacement. Originally, our scope of work did not include that, so we are able to use the ARPA funds, which are restricted for uses that include water and sewer infrastructure, to support this additional amount as outlined in the packet. So, sorry for the long-winded explanation, and thanks for bearing with me.
Your Honor, I move to schedule a public hearing at the November 18th, 2024 City Council meeting for the use of ARPA funds for climate action plan recommendations, mobile library resources, community health needs assessment recommendations, and Maplewood Avenue waterline upgrades.
Second.
Any questions, Councilor Cook and Councilor Dutton?
Thank you, Your Honor. I actually don't have a question, but I had a comment in looking at the draft community health improvement plan. I was thrilled to see the additional ARPA funds designation for implementation of that plan, especially with the discussion we've been hearing in the community about increasing homelessness, and that is identified in the plan, and hopefully these funds will help us work with our partner agencies in the community to help alleviate some of the concerns around the unhoused.
Councilor Dutton.
I simply want to add that the Sustainability Committee is in full support of the two actions that are using the former CAP funding, one being for Bright Action. For those who don't know, it's a digital platform which could help individuals to see how they could reduce their own greenhouse gas emissions. And the e-bike charging station sounded really cool the way it was described to me, and hopefully I'm not getting this way off base, but to take parking spaces, put kind of a solar shade in so you could charge e-bikes there, which obviously need to find spaces that are in the sun to use. I think
Correct.
That's why it's still open where they're going to go.
Right.
But that's exciting and cool.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thanks very much. Item number 5 is a request to execute a new license for the Ceres Street compactor. We are in the process of updating all of our agreements, and the first one before you, and there will be several to follow at future meetings, will be the Ceres Street compactor license agreement, which had a 10-year term ending as far back as 2019, had an automatic renewal provision for an additional 5 years, which was not exercised because of several provisions needing to be amended. And as such, we are looking to clean up the agreement, make all the appropriate amendments that are listed in the packet, and notably, and with the support of the user of the compactor, we are including an annual license fee for the compactor, along with administrative fee in the event that a notice of default needs to be issued. These fees, just so everyone is aware, will be recommended to the fee committee as part of their full hearing by the Health Department for this and other agreements for dumpsters on city property to cover all administrative costs associated with the inspection of dumpsters, generally and issuance of default notices if required. And as posed to me and staff by Councilor Tabor, just to give you all a heads up, we are in the process of updating these agreements. We're here to you first with Series Street. We'll be reaching out to the owners of the other compactors, which include those on Church Street, Partridge Street, Haven Court, Pleasant at the old Warrett behind Pleasant Street, really, and the Worth Lot. So this will be the first of several to come before you.
Your Honor, I'm going to recuse myself.
Councilor Bullock, any other questions? Councilor Tabor.
Just a clarification, is the $1,500 a one-time or an annual?
That is annual.
Okay. Yeah, and I certainly think since if these were, if you were contracting with Waste Management or somebody like that, you'd be paying more than $1,500. So they're getting the use of city property for a dumpster and city collection, which has no charge.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm just curious what the current fee for service is.
There is no current fee. We're looking to acknowledge that there needs to be a fee with all of the work that goes into these agreements and licenses and in the inspection thereof.
And my follow-on is there an opportunity at this location or at other locations to add additional users to the site?
I think it's on a case-by-case basis, and it would have to be understood by inspections and zoning and all the abutters as to whether that would be appropriate. So I wouldn't want to give an answer across the board.
Other questions? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Was there a motion?
Oh.
Yes.
It was.
Yep.
Oh, no.
No.
Actually, we didn't have one.
Oh, yeah.
Councilor Tabor just started talking. Okay. All right, Councilor Tabor.
I had a question. All right. Move that the city manager be authorized to execute and accept the extension of the Series Street compactor license as presented.
Second.
Any discussion now that we have a motion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
The
Any
last item-
abstentions? One.
Sorry.
We remember what we did.
Last item, Your Honor, is a request for a temporary construction license for Cedar and Salt LLC, looking to make improvements to property owned by Ms. Guerrera at 439 Lincoln Avenue, Unit 2, looking to locate a dumpster in front of the property on Lincoln Avenue. There is an existing encumbrance permit in place that is set to expire on November 14th. That license area is 120 feet in total, depicted in Exhibit A in your packet, and the licensee is requested to use the dumpster for a total of 83 days, which takes this till February 5th, 2025. The 120 square feet for a daily fee of $6 per day at 83 days represents a total license fee of $498.
Your Honor, I move that the city manager be authorized to execute and accept a temporary construction license to encumber the Lincoln Avenue right-of-way that abuts 439 Lincoln Avenue, Unit 2, as requested.
Second.
Any discussion? Councilor Lombardi.
Just a question, Your Honor, thank you. The letter that requested this had what seemed to be an extended period of time for a bathroom, and I just wondered about that.
I know that we confirmed that that was the length of time, and that was the answer that the contractor gave back.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
All right. Now on to presentations and written communications. We have email correspondence.
I move to accept and place on file.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next up, a letter from Reverend Ellen Quadras of the South Church Unitarian Universalist requesting permission to hold a Held in One Spirit and Interfaith Election Day gathering at the African Burying Ground on Tuesday, November 5th, 2024, from 7 p.m. to 7:30 p.m.
I move to refer to the city manager with authority to act.
Second?
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
We have an appointment to be considered at the next council meeting. Ronald Baisden to the African Burying Ground. Thank you for putting your application back in. And next, we have the Assistant Mayor and Councilor Lombardi.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just an update from the EDC. I'll kind of give you a little highlight, and then Councilor Lombardi will pick it up. In the start of this year, the planning, the EDC was looking at what it wanted to identify or tackle as a scope of work for the year. And one of the things that they talked about was this perception that inspections and permitting were a big issue in Portsmouth and in our inspections department. The EDC proposed for part of an investigation that had focused on the period from FY 2020 to FY 24 and to work with the building department to kind of get a report back. Shanti, our chief building inspector, came, met with the EDC and also provided some data. And really, you can find this all in the memo in the packet. One of the things, and I quote from Shanti, is that when he started working for the city inspection department, he felt that it was in crisis mode, had hundreds of permit applications that were backlogged. Inspection requests were several weeks to months out. Builders were doing work without permits throughout the city. Additionally, the department was understaffed, resulting in communications going unanswered for an extended period of time. Overall, the department lacked guidance and direction. So Mr. Shanti took over in the end of 2021, and as you'll read in this report provided by the EDC, has really turned the department around. And I would pass it to Mr. Councilor Lombardi to kind of touch on some of those highlight points because.
Yeah, okay, thank you. The couple things happened. One was that they have a new permitting software that has enabled a much easier path and is fully transparent to the users, the contractors, the owners, and that has helped tremendously. It also is a multi-departmental software so that the fire department can be in the loop on all the permits, etc. They also have office hours that are just walk-in office hours that allow people to come in, and they become much more approachable. The details are tremendous. They had, just for an example, in 2020, they performed 6,292 inspections, but only processed 2,779 permits. So there's a big backlog from that. The total inspections in 2024 were 12,563, and the permits processed were 5,198. So there's it really stepped up the efforts, and it's made a big difference. I think the contractors are feeling good about that, coming back to the city. There were contractors that just wouldn't work here.
And just to close out the hope, as part of this hope from the report from the EDC, is to assuage the belief that Portsmouth is hard to work in. It's hard to get permits. It's hard to get inspections, and so we've seen by these numbers doubling, almost, doubling in the last 4 years, in sense doubling almost exactly since Inspector Wolf took over. So I know that EDC, as you will read in your memo, has good faith in the inspections department, and I hope that that can translate to a better understanding in public perception. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lombardi and Assistant Mayor. I was encouraged at this, and Shanti does a great job. Can-do attitude, and I think that's throughout the entire inspection department. I think the perception has changed in terms of the inspections. Would love to see if the EDC is so inclined to bring the same effort and enthusiasm to some of the ordinances that we have, and see if there's a way to reduce some of the ordinances we have or look at ones where that perception is that we're overgoverned from a zoning perspective as well, and see if there's a way to tease out that. But
Happy
leave
to
that up
bring that back at 7:30 in 2 weeks in the morning.
All right. Councillor Tabor, Councillor Blaylock, and Councillor Moreau. Report on the CIP, citizen CIP request.
Yes, Your Honor, we got together last week. There weren't as many requests as the prior year, but they were all good and they were all thoughtful, and usually the people who put them in come to advocate for them. So it's a great chance to engage with residents and hear what their neighborhood needs. We reviewed 15 requests. 5 were part of existing CIP projects in our pipeline already. I think when citizens come to City Hall, they think this could be fixed really quickly. Well, there's a long line of projects in the CIP that have been there for years. So we have to sometimes temper expectations, and yes, it's going to happen. No, it's not going to be next month or the next 6 months. It may take a year or two. But a couple of that were rose to the top for us. We had neighbors in Middle Street and South Street when they wanted improvements to their sidewalks there, and Peter Rice agreed, and those have been moved up in priority in the semi-annual, every 2-year sidewalk upgrades. And there was also a request from the Sustainability Committee for a study of microtransit, and all 3 of us as councilors could see multiple benefits from that. So we recommended that be included in the CIP. Lastly, we know that the elementary school parents really want to see the playgrounds upgraded. They've got a just case. Those are 20-year-old equipment playgrounds, and they don't have any handicapped access. There's new state law that requires asphalt instead of the wood chips, which we have. The wood chips that tend to have differing elevations as well. Superintendent McLaughlin spoke to that. He said that he's putting elements in his CIP for new playgrounds, and that parents will not have to be compelled to raise money for their playgrounds, that this will be in the CIP that he's putting forward, starting with work in 2026 after a design phase in 2025. So that was about it. There's a complete rundown of all the items in a chart that I put in the packet.
Thank you, Councilor Tabor. Councilor Lombardi.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Tabor mentioned the microtransit. That is another area that the EDC is looking at. The business community is very interested in that as well.
And it's a key to housing.
Thank you, Councilor Lombardi. And thanks for the work on the CIP. Not easy, and it's just the beginning. And it's going to happen faster this time around, so appreciate getting the head start. Next up is the no approvals of grants or donations. City Manager has a few informational items.
I do, thank you, Your Honor. They're quick. And actually, the next time this group gets together will be on Tuesday, November 12th, in a standalone meeting to hear about the CIP itself. We will have the big presentation. So with that, item number 1 is the draft community health improvement plan. We touched upon it earlier with the reference to the ARPA funding. Kim McNamara, our public health director, is here. She has a couple verbal comments to make, and I'd like to give her and her staff a lot of credit, along with Dr. Tori Jennison, for pulling this work together.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you. As you recall, in 2022, the City Council approved the use of ARPA funds to complete a community health profile, which includes a community health needs assessment and a community health improvement plan. The Community Health Profile, a 69-page document, was completed in 2023 and is rich with data and information about Portsmouth as a whole. It is a snapshot in time using the best available, most reliable data. Prior to this, a profile had not been completed since 2007. And although the entire community was affected by the pandemic, it became clear that several populations were impacted more severely. A community health needs assessment was then conducted, resulting in an outline for future community health improvement planning. The community health needs assessment was developed through community listening sessions with individuals and representatives from the identified vulnerable populations to understand their needs and perceptions of attaining health and wellness. It is by no means all-inclusive, but it is a starting point, and many common themes emerged from that process. The draft Community Health Improvement Plan outlines those themes and provides some recommendations, excuse me, just getting over a cold, toward achieving improved health and wellness to all Portsmouth residents in daily life through disasters and recovery. Any of us that are left more vulnerable makes all of us less resilient. So the ultimate recommendation for the city is to build a culture based on the philosophy of health in all policies, which is a philosophy that in many ways can be implemented very simply. And it allows the city to ensure that the impact on our most vulnerable citizens, as well as the larger community, is considered whenever policy, infrastructure, investment, and planning decisions are made and implemented. Thank you.
Kim, thank you. And Kim and crew got this draft to us last week. We're all in the process of reviewing it. And as such, we welcome comments from the public, comments from the council. We will bring, and the comments can come directly to me, and I'll work with Kim and staff. We will seek final acceptance of the plan at the next meeting, which will be held on November 18th. Thanks a million, Kim.
Thank you.
Kim?
The second update is verbal and quick. We had a Peace Development Authority board meeting last Thursday. Councilor Lombardi was kind enough to sit in. The board had a presentation, as did our audit committee on which I sit, from our auditing firm Barry Dunn, and the board approved the certified annual financial statements for the years ending 2023 and 2024, both fiscal. There were clean audits with no findings. The airport has seen an uptick in activity and has served to host several forces and tours of duty involved in hurricane relief efforts of late, and is still active in supporting and hosting global activities, and they're proud to do so. In 2025, on September 6th and 7th, they are proud to host the air show with the Blue Angels, and they saw 80,000 people, spectators, come for the Thunderbirds a couple of years ago. They expect that number to be at least 20% higher. And October 2nd marked the last visit for this year for American Cruise Lines. They were largely viewed as successful. They look to have more in 2025, and salt ships are on their way. That's the PDA update. With regard to an update on the Sherburne RFP, here is what we have to share, and we're excited to do so. On Friday, October 11th, the city received proposals from all 4 pre-qualified firms for below-market housing at the Sherburne property. As a reminder, those 4 firms are Avesta Housing, Penrose, Portsmouth Housing Authority, and the Preservation of Affordable Housing. On October 18th, a meeting was convened of the selection committee for reviewing all material. The selection committee still consists of the 8 members of senior leadership that reviewed the RFQs. Neither the deputy city manager nor myself are part of those discussions. It's purely the senior leadership team from planning, facilities, economic development, and inspections. This is the committee's charge on the 18th was to receive guidance on reviewing and scoring and understanding the evaluation sheet, and as such, they were sent out to review and read thoroughly the proposals, which are, as you can imagine, densely packed with responsive information and need some careful time to review. The selection committee will reconvene a week from this Friday, October 25th, which will give them adequate time to review the submissions and comment. The selection committee will determine at that time if additional information may need to be requested of any of the proposers, or if scoring can be completed and recommendations made. So what we are proposing at this point would be to ask if the City Council would like to set up a work session as a standalone meeting in mid to late November, so that you can hear from the selection committee and have a review of their proposals and their commentary. And what we would make clear is that all proposals and the selection committee's recommendations would be circulated not only to the council, but to the public as well, in advance of that meeting. The council may be encouraged or wish to include the housing committee and work as a joint session. That's certainly your prerogative. And we thought that a standalone meeting of just the housing committee might be hard given all the other business that the council needs to conduct. So maybe it makes, I'll leave it to you, but it may make more sense to work in that fashion. So we take our cues from you with regard to timing. There are 3 dates that Kelly and I have talked about that are clear on the council and other meetings agenda toward the end of November. So I'll stop there, take some thoughts or comments.
Is there a motion, Sister Mayor?
Comment
or a comment?
first. Yeah. I definitely think we should have a work session to hear back from the senior staff. And then I would also propose that, after that work session, it gets sent to the housing committee for review and opinion to report back to the council. Because it's not going to,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
would
I was
assume,
thinking of-
do we plan on making this public before the work session?
We would, yes.
Okay, so then
Why not joint? Yeah.
It's faster.
yeah, then we could do joint.
Okay, how many, remind me
Our
if you-
housing committee is quite large.
It is quite large.
It is quite large. I think we have
11?
13, 15?
I think 11.
11
That's where we're
members
at.
plus staff. But
Yeah.
the staff's all overlaps, so.
So I guess, when is our next housing committee
We
meeting?
don't meet again till the 14th.
Well, that was one of the dates I was going to propose.
Oh, well,
And what are the other dates?
Thursday, November 14th, Wednesday, November 20th, and then the week everyone would probably like me to avoid, the week of Thanksgiving, which is Monday, the 25th.
So if we did the 21st, we could present it to.
Planning board's that night.
Okay.
I'd stay away from that.
I'd say we just have a joint meeting.
If we
Well,
do
we
a
could
joint
do a
meeting,
meeting
we can,
first.
I'd do a joint meeting on the 14th.
Okay.
it's going to be a lot of folks, so it might make sense. I'm just trying to think of the logistics of, can we fit as many people?
We can make it happen.
Your Honor, maybe
we do-
housing committee could be 5 o'clock and council could be.
It's a long night for, I guess, if we're hearing a presentation from staff, and so there'll be time for questions, so even if we're not all sitting at the table, we can all ask the questions and
Yeah.
make sure we go through that, and I think it's easy, I think it'll be easier for folks to have one place, even if they're watching it on Zoom, to hear all the questions
Yeah.
of the council, and hopefully this will be, and it will be public before that meeting, hopefully with enough time to prepare questions in advance of the presentation. But let's try to go for the 14th, if possible.
You'll also have the work session on the CIP on the
Yes.
12th. I just want to make sure everyone,
Oh,
That's
man.
on the 12th.
It's on the 12th.
busy week.
Yep.
That's getting
Yeah.
busy.
Your schedule.
I will not be here.
Your Honor.
RPC.
Don't
Council
Double
Tabor.
meeting on Wednesday.
Question for the city manager.
Yes.
So will we get a ranking in the opinion of your working group?
I'm not going to answer that yet because they haven't done the work yet. So what I think we would like to do is give a review of thoroughness of proposals. Talk about where we may see similarities, where we may see differences. If that ends up being a ranking of sorts, that will be included.
Yeah, I guess as a counselor, I'd urge that because disposition of property is a city manager function.
Sure.
And I think we'd like to hear your groups, I
Opinion.
know, talked about
Sure.
a matrix of how to rank them. I think that'd be helpful.
Understood. Thank you.
And I imagine there would be different qualifications that, maybe there's one that elevates the top on all functions, but I imagine there will be trade-offs in terms of the selection. But, okay, so is there a motion, or is this just need information back on the?
Your Honor, I would make a motion to host a joint work session between the Housing Committee and the City Council for a presentation and update on the RFP for the Sherburne property.
For the 14th of
For the 14th of November, sorry. In my head, I said that first.
We have a time.
6 p.m.?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Great. Lastly, I'm joined in person by the Deputy City Manager for Finance and Administration, Nathan Lunny. I'm joined on Zoom by our Assessor, Roseanne Lentz, and we're proud to give you the update on where we are with revaluation. By way of status, really, Vision is still conducting hearings for commercial properties, and we will take requests for that through the end of this week. Residential hearings are complete, and we are in the final stages of inspecting properties where owners have requested us to do so. And to date, the following counts are from the residential hearings. Less than 10% of residential properties, or the number is 663, scheduled a hearing with our third-party vendor, Vision Government Solutions. 65 properties either canceled or did not show for their appointment. 285 properties requested an interior and exterior inspection of their property, which the office is in the process of completing. They've done a good 2/3 of that so far. So once all the inspections and review of both commercial and residential properties are completed, a final analysis and review will be conducted to see if other changes need to be made or proposed prior to the finalization of the revaluation, which we hope will be by the beginning of next month in November. And the reason Nathan is coming to the microphone is we want to talk about what we've discussed as a team internally relative to considering any change in the elderly and disabled exemption limits. Nathan.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Assessing Director Lentz presented a series of data to myself and the city manager, and we agreed that we would at this point not recommend further change to the exemption levels this year. Now let me share with you briefly the data. Elderly and disabled exemptions granted represent right now 2% of our residential parcels. There are 145 elderly exemptions that were granted and 2 disabled. In the category of elderly exemptions, 145, 45% of them will have no tax obligation this year as a result of the exemption that you've already voted. 38% will have a tax obligation on the assessed value that is between their exemption and $750,000, which is that metric that we used as the median family home. So their tax liability will be on something between $225,000 and $375,000. 17% that remain will have a tax obligation on an assessed value that's greater than $750,000. So your exemption has provided relief fully for 45% of those eligible, and 83% of those that are eligible will have an obligation for less than half of that exemption amount of that limit of $750,000 or lower. Part of what drove the conversation and the decision not to recommend right now any additional change was that total value of the exemptions granted for both elderly and disabled, $56.8 million of value, which equates at that estimated tax rate of $11.20 that we're working with right now. That translates to $636,000. The assessor was quick to bring the numbers that she has at her disposal and said, that's 6 cents of tax rate, and would represent for a family with that median home value of $750,000 an additional $45 of taxes as we shift those. If there's no change to the current exemption levels, which we don't recommend, approximately 74% of the tax obligations for those qualified will be exempt for this tax year ahead of us, fiscal year 25 and tax year 24. Wanted to share that with you because at last conversation it had been requested and suggested that we should revisit.
Thank you, Nathan. Any questions? Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Roseanne.
Thank you.
And that is it. Anything under miscellaneous? I'd wait a motion.
So moved.
Well, you don't even know what I was going to say.
Miscellaneous
He
in this
raised this
group?
was pointed out not making enough money by Massimo, so could have been nice. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Good night, Portsmouth.